This is the Collector Car Podcast, the home for the auto enthusiast. Join Greg Stanley as he applies over 25 years of insights and analytical experience to the collector car market. He will interview the experts and throw in some fun stuff as well.
Well, I'm very excited to introduce a special guest today, Gary Wales. Gary, how you doing today?
I am doing fantastic, Greg.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time today, and I became aware of you, as I'm sure a lot of other folks have, on Jay Leno's Garage, and you have some really crazy, cool cars.
Yeah, we're very fortunate. My friend and I, Andres Ronnie, have been on there 4 times. I think that's quite a few times for there.
Yeah. Now, for our listeners that aren't familiar with your cars, because they're really outrageous and fun, could you tell us just an overview of the cars you have featured on there?
Okay, well, one of them was just my 1920 American LaFrance fire engine, completely restored. And what happened is I have become very interested in saving American fire truck history.
Yep.
Because what happens is when they become redundant and old, they just kind of push them out in the weeds. And I was looking for platforms to come and build some kind of fun cars. And I started to check out on fire trucks. And American LaFrance was built in Elmira, New York. Started in the 1830s. They just ceased production in within the last 5 years. And what would happen is that these fire trucks in 1910, 11, 12, 13, 15 all cost in the $10,000 to $12,000 range generally.
Right.
And people say, oh, that's not very much money. Well, in those days, that was equal to in excess of $500,000.
Right.
So it's a wonderful platform, and they were so well built. They were built to last 100 years, and they all have. We're building number 8, which is very special. We find them in deplorable condition, find them in the woods, we find them half buried, and you can still save them because they were so well done. And I have built now 7. We're building the 8th one, and they're my salutes to the great racing cars of the heroic age in the beginning of the century up through 1910, 12 or so. And we have a hell of a lot of fun with them.
Yeah.
They're very enormous, very big cars, and people seem to like them. I guess they're kind of very imposing.
Yeah, so for our listeners, these are built on big, huge fire trucks that are remade into cars, and pretty much are all 2-seaters, right? Boat tail speedsters, or, they're not. You don't have any 4-seaters, do you?
No, I only build 2-seaters. People say, well, how come you do so many boat tails? And I'm at a show with 300 cars or something like that, and you say, well, how many do you see here? And the guy goes, oh, that's right, there aren't any.
Yeah, and I saw in one of your episodes you labeled yourself a retro designer, kind of taking the best of the past and putting it to a new use, right?
That's absolutely true. I can pick and choose what I want. I try to use absolutely the best of everything on my builds, and you can always generally save the engines and transmissions in that, and the reason for that is they were built for people that didn't even know how to drive in the early days. They, maybe in a little small town where the first thing that was motorized would be their fire truck. Mm-hmm. They would order it from Elmira, it'd be shipped on a train, it would get there, and then they would have a manual that says, here's how you drive it. Your left foot goes here, your right foot goes here, and that's how they learned, not even ever seeing one before.
Right.
And they could do that, but they were built so well that they lasted that tremendous amount of time. Even when we find them after they've been dumped in the woods for 50 years, it may have only 10 or 12,000 miles on it because they only used them when they were needed as fire engines.
Right. And didn't you say in one of the interviews that the reason that they were so ornate with all the gold leaf and everything is that the town kind of took pride in their fire trucks?
Oh, absolutely. That was the crown jewel of that town. I know even when I was a kid, and I'm sure the same thing with you, you hear the fire engines coming, you go on out and look at them. They're beautiful, and they're big, and the bells are ringing, and the sirens going, and people hanging off of them. It was absolutely, it was a circus. The circuit was in town when that went.
So what was your very first one that you did? Which one was it?
Rusty 1. It was called, First of all, let me give you a little story. I call them Bestionis, which is, kind of my way of, I like the Italian concept on cars. I like the sound of them. And my very favorite car in the world is called the Beast of Turin. And it was a 1910 Fiat that in 1911 in New York State went 130 miles an hour one way when they thought your face would blow off at 70 miles an hour.
Right.
Unbelievable car. And it's 28 and a half liters, 4-cylinder.
Wow.
Can you imagine that?
Huge. Yeah.
It is beyond huge. And so that was kind of what I patterned my cars after, because when you see it, it would blow flames. They named it the Beast of Turin because when they built it, they would test it on the streets of Turin, Italy, very early in the morning.
Oh, wow.
To see how it was running. And it would blow flames sometimes 8 and 10 feet out.
Wow.
And it would catch the locals on fire, and they'd be beating it out, going, Viva l'Italia, Viva l'Italia, beating the flames out. Unbelievable. And that car is still around today, and they run it at Goodwood in England.
Wow,
and it draws huge crowds, and it's the favorites of them all. So that's kind of what I patterned my cars after. And the first one, we did it, and it was we were just about finished with it. And this one, I put in carburation. I had 6 Harley-Davidson carburetors on it, all sync, one for each cylinder. And it had, these trucks have 6 cylinders, and they're T-heads, which means 2 pistons Siamesed into each block. And generally they would have 24 plugs, 18 to 24 plugs for a 6-cylinder engine. And people say, well, why? That was because at that time, gasoline was so unreliable, you could drop a match into a bucket of it, it might just put it out. And the only thing worse was the batteries. You'd get maybe 1 shot, maybe 2 if you were really lucky to get it running. So they recommended you hand crank it. Well, that's not a problem anymore with the quality of gasoline and batteries.
Right.
So anyway, back to the story. We're just about finished with it. And a friend came over. He said, look, Gary, I'm going out for Italian tonight. And I said, hey, great. Would you do me a favor? Would you please ask the waiter, emphasis on the waiter, how you say the beast in Italian? And he said, sure. Comes back. He says, it's La Bestioni, capital L-A, capital B-E-S-T-I-O-N-I. I said, wonderful. Thank you. We had all of the signatures on the car and the radiator and everything done, La Bestioni. And Andreas and I were at our very first car show, and you can imagine the crowd that we had around it, because no one has ever seen anything like this. Big, giant boat tail, pointy thing, 18 and a half feet long, 7 feet in the air. I mean, it's a big, and it's loud as you can imagine that 14 liters in a 6-cylinder engine would be.
Right.
Well, we're all there. We're standing back, and we're busting our buttons. We're so proud. And a little teeny lady comes up with her hair all messed up. She said, you've got your nerve. And I said, what? Pardon me, ma'am? She says, you've got your nerve. And I said, what? She says, and now there's 30, 40 people standing around. She's putting on a show. And she says, well, if you wanted it to be a male beast, why didn't you name it Le Bestioni, not La Bestioni? That's a female beast. You named it female. And she went on for about 5 minutes, haranguing us something awful. The crowd standing around, big crowd around now. And finally she stormed off, stomped away, and a woman next to me looked over and she smiled and she said, well, you sure named it right.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, looking back on that first car, is there anything you wish you had done differently with it?
No, not really, because every car that we do absolutely everything we possibly can, because the last thing I ever want to hear is, gee, that's really good, but why didn't you do that?
Wow,
and
that's nice.
So that's why we do it. I put the best, I usually use French headlights on them because they're cast alloy and beautifully built things, Marshalls, and whatever it is, we use the best we possibly can. So the comments are, gee, that's really wild, but they don't say, geez, you should have did this, or why didn't you do that, or gee, you used this on that, and you could have used something else. So that's why we do it. But the main thing is we're saving fire truck history. we're having a lot of fun, and it's our salutes to the great old cars. And people don't normally see big double chain drive machines coming down the road, clunking and blowing smoke and flames out of them.
How has the La Bestioni, has it evolved in these different versions? Like, have you seen, like, you're really going towards more this particular trend versus not, or are they pretty much just an evolution of the same design?
Pretty much the evolution, because it's on the same chassis, but each one is totally different than the others, with the exception of Rusty 1 and Rusty 2. And a little quick on that one was we found this chassis, and it was buried out in the woods for over 50 years in Sacramento, California. And two old firemen heard about it. They said, well, we can't leave a fire truck out in the junky woods. He said, this is it's historically important. It saved people's lives and property. And so they went and they found it, and it was 21 trees had grown around it and through it.
Oh, wow.
So they cut all these trees down. They put it on a trailer, and they're bringing it back home. And one of the old retired firemen said to his pal Jack, he said, Jack, we'll take this on over to your house. He said, oh no, we won't. My wife will kill me. He says, well, I can't take it home. My wife will work on me too. So what do we do? He said, well, why don't we call that character in L.A. Wales? I hear he buys these things. Well, I stood up, and that's how we got Rusty. And anyhow, on the hood, it was Sacramento Fire Department, but it was this SFD.
Yep.
And you could barely see it because it was all, just faded all to pieces. But you could still see the SFD, and I said, there's no way I can destroy patina that beautiful. So I said, well, what can I do? Well, I'm going to clear coat it just to see. I took a soft pad and went over it to get anything loose off of it, and then I started clear coating it. I clear coated it until it was really shiny and looked great, and you clear coat it inside and out and everything else. And people said, well, that won't last. Talk that to the car, because it's been done now for 7 years. And it's beautiful, and people love it. And I named it Rusty 1. And we rusted everything else on it.
Right.
And it got all these different patinas and that, and so that's it. But I had 4 fenders that I bought from a friend of mine in Florida, shipped them out. They're really round, big round fenders that almost went around completely. And I cut them in half, and I added a little aluminum piece. And the way I set them on the cars, the front, you catch the road, and the second one is out the back. And anyhow, I had made 8 fenders out of it. So I have Rusty 1 and I have Rusty 2.
Right. The most recent one, was that the boat tail wooden one?
Well, most of them have wood on it. My next door neighbor came from across the street, came over one time and said, Gare, is there anything I could do to help? Well, he happened to be the president of the Antique Boat Society. I said, well, maybe there is. So anyhow, he cuts and forms, and we help glue it on, and then we end up sanding it and doing all the varnish and everything on it. And they're just beautiful. They're done in the same method as they did in the 30s, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, like on Chris Craft and other boats. They're beautiful, and it's just a lovely thing to look at. And it's unusual.
Yeah.
And we apply that I did on the first one was an aluminum boat tail that we made, but it wasn't strong enough to hold the wood, which is a 1/4 inch thick, on and glued on because it kind of crushed. So I had a friend who has a yacht manufacturing company, and we made a buck, and then he makes about 3/8 of an inch to a 1/2 inch thick boat tail that we designed on it, and that's what we use. And that will take, for safety's sake, that will take a rollover or anything else with this thing. By the way, they still weigh 3.5 tons.
Right.
And they'll do 100 miles an hour chain drive. So it's a real carnival going down the road. People love it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now, you said you're working on number 7 right now?
Number 8. And
number
that's
8.
The salute. Yes, that's the salute to the Beast of Turin. It'll be done in a couple of 3 months, and it'll be on the road.
Now, I did see on your Facebook page you're working on some type of, what was it, an REO Speedwagon?
A little Rio, yeah. And I did that just to show people, because not many people are building cars anymore. Or if they do, they say, well, I buy a crate motor here and I bought these fenders there and then I bought these instruments. No, build one yourself. And there's not many people doing that. So I bought this Rio, 1917 Rio, that had been in California, but had been out in the desert for over 50 years.
Wow. And
we brought it in with the old body, and it took me 2 days to get the body off. I mean, what was pieces of it left, and it was horrible. And we have now been on it for 30 days, 30 working days by Fred Audrey-Saranda and I. We've worked together now for 21 years. Well, we work Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays if we're not at a car show. And we knock these cars out in 1 year. And sometimes we get 2 out, as we did with the Boat Tail Roses, built bodies and get them finished in 1 year. And so anyhow, I'm doing this car now, and I did a little video of it, and I show you what it looked like. And then a few days later, working days later, we show you the development on it. And so in 30 working days, we have got this on its wheels. The chassis is done. We're going to fit another motor into it because the original one was completely dead. Nothing could even hardly be saved. And so we're putting another motor into it, an early motor, by the way, I might add. And then I'll build the body on it. So we hope within 60 working days to have this completely built and done, finished, painted. We're doing it in little sections. We do the movies on it, little videos on it, so people can see exactly what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it. And I explain to people so they can copy and do it themselves. Because it's
right.
When you do these, it's such a wonderful feeling to be able to work with your own hands and do something. And if you build a body that you like, that's what happens. It makes you happy, and hopefully it'll make other people happy. But you can express yourself.
Right, for sure. Now, other than making these awesome, incredible automotive works of art, what was your career? Were you a fabricator? Were you a designer?
No, I started off in 1960, and I became a stockbroker. And I was, believe it or not, in Detroit, Michigan, and I was the last stockbroker ever that became a New York broker in Detroit with a New York house with a high school education.
Wow, impressive.
And then I met this lady on I used to be a singer, and I had been fixed up on a blind date. And some fellow said, "Oh man, you're going to like this lady. She's a car person." I said, "Well, I'm not car-y, but we'll go out." So I wanted to impress her, so I took her down to the Detroit River, and they had the Bobolo cruises, these big steamers, and go out around Bobolo Island in Canada and up to St. Clair and Detroit River and come back, and everybody's singing and have a great time, and I'm entertaining, and I'm impressed her. I thought I really impressed her good, but I did like all dummies in their 20s do. I drank too much, so on the way home, I crashed the car.
Oh, no.
I really impressed her. So that night coming home from the hospital on a bus, I felt so stupid, and I'm trying to explain it. And I said, "Look, if the car had handled better, I probably wouldn't have crashed it." She says, "No problem." She says, "Since you don't have a car, I'll pick you up in the morning. A girlfriend of mine, her boyfriend has a car, and he wants to sell it, and it'll probably be, we'll take a look at it." And I said, "Okay." So she picked me up the next morning. We go over to the house, and here's this guy, and I'll never forget the scene. He's wearing a Air Force jumpsuit, sort of that grayish blue color, and he's out polishing this fire engine Allard L4 with a Granatelli Hemi engine in it.
Wow.
I fell in love with the car, fell in love with the lady, had the car for 6 or 7 years, had the lady over 50.
Oh, good.
and I went to the wall for cars. I just went crazy on them, and I got out of the brokerage business. I left Detroit in '66 and came to California, and I drove the Ferrari bread van out here.
Wow.
And because I got into Ferraris with a friend of mine, and came out to California and bought a house, and been in the same house now since 1967. And it's been a real whirlwind. In about 1970, I got back into the brokerage business out here, and I hated it. tell you the truth, I hated it and didn't really do that very well in it because I didn't like it.
Right,
And
right.
finally I said, to hell with this, and I came home, and my wife came home, and I said, well, I retired. She said, retired? What do you mean retired? You have no money? The house isn't paid for? I said, yeah, I know, but you're working, aren't you? She said, yeah. And I said, well, I'm going to retire. And she said, okay. So I cut lawns and trimmed trees and polished cars and that for a year or two. And after a while, doing what you're doing, you're available for ideas and opportunities that come along. And I started kind of wheeling and dealing in cars and doing all kinds of crazy things like that. And so basically I've been retired for 50 years. I do what I kind of want, but I build these cars and then sell them. And some I keep, some I sell, and wheel and deal and just have a good time.
So speaking of which, great lead-in, which of the La Bestionis do you still have?
Rusty 1, Rusty 2, the Batmobile, and the one that we're currently building, plus a bunch of other damned old cars that I love.
So what are any fun ones you would like to mention of the other cars?
Sure. I have the only copy of the Y Job, which is the 1938 Buick, and that was the very first concept car by Harley Earl. And the concept car was designed to show you what was coming in the future. And I have an exact copy of it, or pretty close anyhow. And that and a Rolls-Royce pickup truck with running water, and just all sorts of crazy things. And that's what I've got. I've got about 10 cars now.
So if you could only keep one of the 8 La Bestionis, which ones would it be? Or which one would it be?
You know, each one is my favorite car as we do them. And probably it'll be the one that I'm doing right now, which is my salute to the original Beast of Turin. And,
oh, wow. Okay.
So it'll be the current one.
Yeah, is that one going to spit fire 8 feet?
No, but it's going to sure make some noise.
And which one is that? What is that based on? An American La France?
Oh, yeah. Everything's on American La France.
Okay. Yeah, and you said something interesting about the bell on those fire engines. Could you kind of tell our audience about that?
Sure. They've got a American La France fire truck of the 20s, teens, 20s, and 30s, had a very unique and pleasant sound. And I was talking to an old pal of mine who was a fireman that drove these things, and he said, I'll tell you why they have that very unique sound, because in the melt, when they're doing that bell, they take the brass and bronze and do that bell. He says they throw 10 silver dollars in it, in the melt, and it gives it that unique sound, that mellow, beautiful sound that's only with American La France. Can you imagine that? They throw in 10 silver dollars.
That's really cool. Well, one thing I like to do at the end of my little interviews is a little game that I call Keep, Cash, and Crush. So I'm going to give you 3 cars, and you have to pick one to keep forever, one to cash in, and one to crush. Is that pretty simple?
Sure.
And my goal is to make it as painful as possible for you. I'm not picking any of your La Bestionis. That's just not fair. 3 of these cars are ones I've seen you with or driving with Jay Leno on his YouTube channel. I think one of them you own and the other 2 he owns. So one of them is a 1911, the Christie fire truck. Is that right?
Well, that's Jay's, I guess.
Okay, that's Jay's. Okay. A 1921 American La France. That was yours, right?
That was mine. The American La France fire truck.
Okay, and then Jay's 1955 Mercedes Gullwing.
Well, I would probably sell the Gullwing.
Yeah, that's probably the highest dollar one.
Yeah, $1 million is, I'd say that's quite a bit of money. And you really don't want to take a chance on hurting them or anything like that. So I'd pass that one along. And the other 2 are between the 21 American La France and the Christie.
Yes, the 11 Christie.
That's an awful fine. You are a tough cookie to give me that one. Oh, geez. Well, I would probably flip a coin, to tell you the truth.
Really? Okay.
Whatever came down, because I can't really destroy fire trucks. And if I did, or any flying machine I had, it'd have to be on, it lost and the other one won.
Well, thank you so much for sharing everything with us today. I love hearing about your cool and awesome creations that you have there. What's the best way for our listeners to learn more about you and what you're doing?
Well, they can go on the internet. It's on Facebook. It's Gary L. Wales. That's Gary, middle initial L, Wales. That's Facebook. Or they can just go Gary Wales Cars, and you can see what's been created on Google. And that's probably the best way to do it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Gary.
Thank you. It's had an enjoyable time. I hope the people come and follow me and see what we're doing.
Thanks for listening to the Collector Car Podcast. Don't forget to give us a nice rating on iTunes and be sure to follow us on Instagram and everywhere else at the Collector Car Podcast.